The small village of Umyadike, nestled between lush green hills and a meandering river, was known for its serenity. The villagers led simple lives, relying on farming, weaving, and trading to sustain their families. In this tight-knit community, Ada stood out like a rare gem. She was not only beautiful, with skin the color of polished ebony and eyes that sparkled with life, but she also possessed a kind heart that endeared her to all. Every morning, she would walk to the river with a basket on her head, humming songs that brought joy to the women drawing water and the fishermen preparing their nets. Ada was the pride of her parents, Nneka and Obiora, who often marveled at how such a radiant soul had been born into their humble home. "She is destined for greatness," Nneka often said. "Her light will guide this village to prosperity." But destiny, as the elders would often caution, was a fickle thing. One fateful day, while Ada was selling her woven baskets at the market, her path crossed with Prince Obis, the heir to the throne of Umyadike. He was a man of striking appearance, but infamous for his arrogance and cruelty. His presence made the villagers uneasy, for his temper could ignite like dry leaves in harmattan. The moment Obis saw Ada, he was captivated. Her beauty was unlike anything he had ever seen. But his fascination was not born of admiration or respect. It was tainted by a selfish desire to possess her. He approached her stall, his voice dripping with feigned charm. "What is your name, maiden?" "Ada," she replied politely, her instincts warning her to be cautious. "Your hands weave wonders, but surely they are not as delicate as you are," he said, picking up one of her baskets. Ada smiled faintly but remained guarded. She had heard tales of the prince's behavior, and she knew his intentions were rarely pure. "Thank you, my prince. If you like the basket, you may have it." But Obis wanted more than a basket. Over the weeks that followed, he pursued her relentlessly, sending servants with gifts and messages. Ada rejected them all, hoping he would grow tired and leave her alone. However, Obis was not a man who accepted rejection. One evening, while Ada was returning from the river, Obis intercepted her on a lonely path. That night, her life changed forever. When she returned home, her parents noticed her silence, her vacant stare, and the trembling of her hands. They tried to comfort her, but she remained distant. A month later, the truth revealed itself. Ada was with child. The news spread like wildfire through the village. Some sympathized with her, while others whispered cruel judgments. When Nneka and Obiora confronted the palace, seeking justice, Obis denied the allegations, mocking their audacity. The king, unwilling to tarnish the royal family's name, sided with his son. Instead of justice, Ada was accused of witchcraft, her pregnancy deemed a plot to entrap the prince. Her punishment was death. As Ada was led to her execution, bound and surrounded by villagers who once admired her, she raised her tear-streaked face to the heavens. "With my blood I curse you, Prince Obis," she declared. "I curse your house, your name, and this village. No child's cry will ever be heard in Umyadike until justice is done." The skies darkened, and a chilling wind swept through the village. Ada's voice echoed in the hearts of the villagers long after her life was taken. The years were not kind to Umyadike. What was once a lively village now resembled a ghost town. The cries of children, once a source of joy, had become a distant memory. Mothers wept in silence, their pain unspoken but shared by all. The fields, once bursting with yams and cassava, grew barren. The men, burdened by sorrow, lacked the spirit to toil the land. Even the river seemed to mourn, its once crystal waters now murky and sluggish. Neka and Obiora remained in their small compound, their lives consumed by grief. They spoke little, but the pain in their eyes told a story of loss and bitterness. The villagers often avoided them, believing their proximity to Ada's curse brought misfortune. In the palace, King Aziaha called frequent meetings with his council. The curse had crippled the kingdom's economy, and whispers of rebellion grew louder. Still, the king remained adamant. Ada's curse is nothing more than coincidence, he declared to his advisors. Our people must learn to endure. But the prince, sitting quietly in the corner, knew better. Obi's once proud demeanor had crumbled under the weight of guilt. He avoided the village, unwilling to face the accusing stares of its people. One night, he stood alone on the palace balcony, staring into the darkness. His mind wandered to that fateful day when Ada had cursed him. Her voice still haunted him, a constant reminder of the life he had taken and the countless lives her curse had claimed since. In his heart, he knew the truth. Ada's curse would not be lifted unless justice was done. But justice, he feared, would demand more than he was willing to give. The village priest, Dibia Anin, grew restless. One night, after a vivid dream in which Ada's spirit appeared to him, he summoned the villagers to the shrine. Ada's spirit remains bound to this land, he announced. She demands justice. Until her soul is at peace, this village will know no peace. He turned his gaze toward the palace. The curse begins and ends with the prince. The villagers nodded in agreement, their resentment toward Obi's growing. A group of elders approached the palace, demanding the prince confess his sins. Bring your son to the shrine, they insisted. Let him face Ada's spirit and seek forgiveness. But the king refused, claiming his son was innocent. The gods will punish the wicked in their own time, he said. As the years passed, the kingdom of Umyadike grew weaker. Neighboring villages, once allies, began to encroach on their borders. The royal guards, understaffed and demoralized, struggled to maintain order. The villagers became desperate. They turned to rituals, offering sacrifices of goats, chickens, and even their most prized possessions, hoping to appease Ada's spirit. But nothing worked. The elders, growing impatient, whispered among themselves about taking matters into their own hands. In the dark corners of the village, rebellion brewed. A group of young men, tired of the king's inaction, began to plot against the royal family. They believed sacrificing the prince to Ada's spirit was the only way to end the curse. Word of their plans reached the palace, and the king ordered the guards to arrest the conspirators. Several men were executed, their deaths further fueling the villagers' hatred. Haunted by dreams of Ada, Obi's began to unravel. He took to drinking heavily, seeking solace in the bottom of a calabash. His once charming smile had been replaced by a permanent scowl, and his eyes held a haunted look. One night, he confided in his mother. "I can feel her spirit, Mother. She will not let me rest." The queen, desperate to save her son, sought the help of Dibia Anin. But the priest's answer was the same: justice must be done. One evening, a strange phenomenon swept through Umyadike. The villagers heard whispers in the wind and saw flickering lights in the forest. The elders claimed the ancestors had returned, angered by the curse. That night, several villagers reported seeing Ada's ghost walking through the village, her eyes filled with sorrow. The sightings sent waves of fear and awe through the community. The elders called for a final meeting with the king, urging him to act. "If we do not right this wrong, the ancestors will abandon us forever," they warned. Unable to escape his guilt, Obi's finally broke. One night he stumbled into the shrine, drunk and disheveled, and fell to his knees before Dibia Anin. "I cannot bear this any longer," he sobbed. "What must I do to end this curse?" The priest looked at him with pity. "You know the answer, my prince. Justice demands sacrifice." The prince's heart sank. He knew the cost, but fear kept him silent. The villagers, fed up with the king's inaction, marched to the palace, demanding the prince be held accountable. Armed with torches and makeshift weapons, they stood united in their call for justice. The king, seeing the rage in their eyes, realized he could no longer protect his son. "The gods have spoken," he declared, his voice heavy with sorrow. The prince must face his fate. Obis, hearing the commotion, stepped out onto the palace steps. For the first time, he looked at the people he had wronged. Their pain and anger were etched into their faces, and he knew there was no escape. "I will go to the shrine," he said, his voice trembling. "Let Ada's spirit decide my fate." The shrine of Dibia Anin was lit with torches as the villagers gathered. A heavy silence filled the air as Prince Obis stood before the sacred altar. His once proud figure was now hunched with shame and fear. The villagers encircled him, their faces a mixture of anger and anticipation. Dibia Anin stepped forward, his staff thudding against the ground with each step. His eyes, sharp and piercing, seemed to see straight into Obi's soul. The prince could barely meet his gaze. "You have brought great sorrow upon this land," the priest began, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Do you now accept your responsibility?" Obis nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I do." The priest raised his staff, pointing it toward the altar. "Kneel before the gods. Call upon Ada's spirit and seek her forgiveness. Only then can we know if the curse can be lifted." The prince hesitated, his hands trembling. He fell to his knees and closed his eyes, murmuring a prayer. The villagers watched in tense silence as the winds picked up, swirling around the shrine. Then a chilling voice broke through the night. "Why do you summon me?" A figure emerged from the shadows, a ghostly apparition of Ada, her form shimmering with an unearthly glow. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and anger as she gazed at the prince. "You took my life, my dignity, and my future," Ada said, her voice heavy with pain. "And now you seek to undo the suffering you have caused." Obis trembled, tears streaming down his face. "I was a fool, Ada. I have lived in torment every day since your death. Please, I beg you, lift the curse. Let the village heal." Ada's ghost moved closer, her gaze softening slightly. "Justice must be served. The blood that was shed must be repaid." The villagers murmured among themselves, realizing the weight of her words. Dibia Anin stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "The gods demand a life for a life. Only the prince's sacrifice can lift this curse." The crowd fell silent as the prince's fate was sealed. Obis, though terrified, nodded slowly. "If my life will restore this village, then so be it." The villagers watched with a mix of sorrow and relief as the priest prepared the ritual. The night was filled with chants and prayers, the air heavy with anticipation. As dawn broke, Obis stood at the center of the shrine, his head held high despite the fear in his heart. Ada's spirit hovered above, her expression unreadable. The final moments were solemn and filled with reverence. The prince's life was taken as an offering to the gods, and as his blood touched the earth, a sudden calm swept through the village. The skies cleared, and the air grew warm and vibrant once more. The villagers felt an unexplainable sense of relief as the cries of a newborn child echoed in the distance, the first sound of life in years. Ada's spirit smiled faintly, her form dissolving into the morning light. The curse was lifted, and the village of Umyadike could begin to heal.